This is welcome to Argo Books. Obviously, my dad needs no introduction, but I would like to say that I have vivid memories. First of all, so it was, you're going to help me out. Geraldine Ferraro, help me.
Ferraro.
1980, 84?
Yeah, 84 Mondale.
Okay, yes. So I remember being very excited about having our first woman vice president nominated. And so I think I was in the fourth grade, and Dad and I would watch the debates, and he taped over them. I can't remember what he taped. I feel like he taped over one of my theater productions or
That's
something.
right.
Because
That's
it would
right.
be in the middle.
Politics is priority. That's what I said.
Politics where I was trying to save $1 by reusing video VHS tapes, and and so they'd be in our cabinet of all of the elections. But I really I know that the man is in the same as in private as he is in public, and he's shared his election love predictions and mystical ideas with so many of us here in West Virginia. And I'm just pleased as punch to introduce my dad.
Hey, thank you. Whoa. Thank you for coming. We are living through one of the closest presidential elections, and certainly the most unpredictable, because what we've had here is a static in the polls that they've registered. There's been little change. There's been little change despite the fact we switched candidates in the middle of a campaign. We had an attempted assassination. We had two conventions. We had one debate. We have now I looked this up, 250 television ads. Individual ads were made. More than $1 billion just on local ads in those states was spent at that. I mean, this is amazing on many parts. And usually historians think that anything that happened 55 years or less is journalism. I'm going to try to put this into perspective. What could happen? What could happen is that one candidate could get the popular vote and the other candidate could get the electoral vote. Now, between 1788, George Washington, and 1888, 1888 was the first time that happened. Before that, we were just lucky in which the popular vote equaled the electoral vote, and there wasn't any question. In 1888, Cleveland lost, even though he got the majority of votes. And it could happen now. It could happen for this election because it already has happened in 2000 and 2016, and it could happen in 2024. And you have to ask, and the interesting thing is that when colonies became nations, for example, India, they imitated separation of powers. They imitated a single executive. They imitated 80% of our Constitution, except what? The Electoral College, which is just does. One way we might understand it is that one of the people at the Constitution Convention said giving people the right to elect a president is like asking a blind person to chart color. There's a very strong feeling that democracy was really dangerous or could be dangerous. So they set up this very elaborate system, and we have to see if that works. I want to talk about a theory. People are talking about, I'm not going to make a prediction. I know you all came for that, and so you can. I won't bet the farm on Harris, but I bet a horse. How about that? It was sitting here. I had an easy way to predict presidential winners, and I have down here, he who grins wins. That candidate in the last 2 weeks who is smiling and talking about positive things ahead wins, because the candidate that's losing goes negative and dark. That worked for a long time. It doesn't work now. Not at all. You're right on that side. So in a sense, we've gone in terms of the Democratic side, we've had a situation where Biden came out and said he was a threat to democracy. And as soon as they changed candidates and went into the convention, what did Harris do? She changed that. She darkened, you got away. Biden wanted his vote because he's not Trump, okay? And he said very dark things about what would happen with Trump. As soon as Harris got in, she didn't fear him, but she did what? What did Halls call? What adjective did he use to describe the opposition? Weird. So you go from danger to weird on that. And then she had an issue, and guess where we are back in the last 2 weeks? Back to dark. And we can discuss this. Is it enough for her to say, I'm not Trump, in order to win this election? Because that's, in a sense, where they're resting down on that. So anyways, there was my presidential smell. Another theory went out there. The other one I'm going to call an economic irony. Right now, if we look at all the stats and all the inflation, in job counts, all the facts, is America in good shape now in the fall of 2024? Yes. By measuring unemployment, by measuring new jobs, by measuring all that. The trouble is, voters make up their mind early. And therefore, they're not thinking about today, it doesn't matter what the true facts are. They're thinking about last summer, in which they had to pay so much for the lettuce and the eggs and all that stuff. This exact thing happened in 1992 with Clinton and Bush, because Bush said we're getting out of a recession, and American voters and Clinton said no, we're not, and Clinton, they ended up voting. So the irony is, you can have good economic times, but you better have it early in the campaign instead of late, in terms of what we're talking about there. The irony of this is, Harris has said, turn the what? Page. Yet, where's she been for the last 4 years?
But she's the vice president.
Well, I know that's, we'll get into that. But the very fact that she is part of the establishment legally, then in a sense, she's gonna, this is usually the other side. But you notice when she talked about turning the page, what was the reception of the audience? This nation's ready for change. Now we can figure out what kind of change, but it's not. I think the most disturbing thing I did in looking at elections was, right now in 2024, Americans are angry and upset. And I did that when they knocked on the doors. I said, Rupp, this seems to be the one theme. And that's dangerously and tragic for this nation. When I've never seen this, there was a situation for the exception. Go back to the candidate who grins wins. Okay, what's the only time that didn't work? 1968, and for you that were there in 1968, we had assassinations, we had the National Guard, we had riots, and the poor Democratic candidate was happy warrior Hubert Humphrey. And that was the exception that proved the rule when America was in trouble. I would think historians would look back on this place as a time of troubles for America, despite the fact, and we should look in the mirror and say this, we are part of the most powerful nation on earth, the richest nation on earth. The numbers are there, but the attitude has gone sour, and that's the danger on that. Polling, I almost feel sorry for pollsters, because what happened in 2016? They all predicted Clinton, and they all fell flat on their face. And what happened in 2020? They underestimated how close it was going to be. So in a sense, if you see the polls between Harris and Trump, add 1 to 2% to Trump, because they've always underestimated him. And we tried to figure out on why, and we think one of the reasons is that I'm shocked, voters lie. And they didn't want to admit that they were voting for Trump.
You still think that's true, though?
Yes. They show that up, at least in polls. But yeah, why?
I guess I'm giving some of my attitude here a little bit on it, but I don't know. It seems like all of a sudden there's some people with their ugly don't mind letting it all hang out. In terms of that are not afraid to say that they're for Trump anymore.
Well, maybe not anymore on that, but they were initially.
Oh, I don't dispute that. I'm just wondering now. Do we need to add it? Should we make that same assumption this year that there's a lot of people that don't want to say that they're for Trump, because I don't see quite the people who are afraid to say that they're for Trump anymore.
Well, I think that's gone down, but there's something called the Brady effect. And Brady was mayor of Los Angeles, and he ran for governor, and the polls had him winning by 8-10% ultimately, and he lost. And they went back and asked why, and because the main thing is he was African American, and people didn't want to tell the pollsters. Now I'll tell you something else about pollsters. How many times do people hang up? 90 out of 100 times they hang up the phone and won't talk. And so these poor pollsters are out there trying to find these people. Now they're still doing it. Despite that fact, it's working out. When I initially started teaching, our class did polls, and everyone was very skeptical. How can just a few tell me what is going on with the many? And I use the analogy of a cake. You don't have to eat the entire cake as long as it's random samples across the way. Nowadays, people take polls as gospel. And what we know is they're pictures, not predictions. And that's what we're talking about. So when they're out there looking for this small 5%, and they got to go hunting. It's called, they call themselves undecided, or we do. Low propensity. That sounds more official, doesn't it, than undecided. We just thought they were people that wanted to hadn't made up their mind yet, because We're now looking at their profile, and the reason we have to hunt them down is they don't care about politics. That's not part of their life. They've got other things going on, which for a political science, it is very difficult to understand how anyone could not focus all the time. But as I've been told by non-political science, you can get a life outside without being there. But anyways, that was the set. So they're looking for this sliver. They're now using the word sliver. Just this tiny book. I went to Syracuse, and one of my classmates started Zogby started a polling in New York, and he hit just perfect on one election. I forgot which election it was. And you know why he did it? He called at night and late. There was a body of voters that were never tapped until Zogby people said, now wait a minute, maybe time is something of time. Well, we've got a question that 5% undecided, and it's a bit scary. Right now, those people in headquarters, or at least voter profiles, know more about you than your spouse. I mean, they know. They have spent 18 months. So they not only know your party, they not only know if you voted, right? They know what podcast you listen to, what TV show you watch, what magazine you subscribe to. And they have this all on a big file. Sometimes I went to Kroger today, and I remember those little discount things. I'm scared to death. They'll probably sold those off, and they know what Rupp is buying every time he's in the grocery store. It's the question, the old days. Remember the old days where you campaigned, the speaker came in, gave his speech, people researched it. Well, I guess that would be a big turnout. Now they want to find, if they get they believe they can get a whole lot of information, they can make accurate predictions. But this is the reason to feel sorry for the pollster. Because what's the one thing they can't predict? Turnout. So that variable could go, so they either turnout was favoring Republicans or favoring Democrats. You don't know until it happens. Before that, all you're doing is guessing. And then your job is guessing, but I suppose they're doing well. Gender gap. Silent issue. Silent issue. Let's go back to 2016. Glass ceiling. Part of almost every one of his speeches. This is a time to make history. Now we have history, and no one's talking about it. So question, we'll get into discussion on why that is. Maybe it's self-evident, but this is not 2016.
Yeah, but it's still there.
This more than that, it's even more stronger than it was in 2016. And we saw that particularly with the key thing with the abortion issue. Kansas, of all states, had a referendum, as did Ohio at that side. So if she wins, part of that will be credited to the gender gap. But the fact that we're not talking about it now, or she's not addressing it right now, says a whole lot about the change in America in just the last 10 years. Closing arguments. We had the closing argument for Trump when he got elected in 2016. I had my class look at the video, because each candidate makes a video that they show the last night before the election. And Clinton got it in there, and she didn't really, according to my class, didn't say that much. But old Trump got in there. And what did he say? I will protect you. I will save your factories. I will do all that. And it's a whole, and he stood in front of a closed down factory. Now, what was interesting is in the sense, That the dark issue is going to be there. So let's trace Harris, excuse me. Biden says dark. Harris says positive. Here at the term turning the page. Now she's going back. And we don't have an October surprise, but anyone know what happened today? They're publicizing that 2 generals who worked with him came out and said he's dangerous. It's almost the same thing what Biden was saying. It's the same thing that we've been hearing for a long time. But now they brought out 2 generals to say that. Why? I already read about it earlier. I already read but now they're literally focusing on this fact that he's a dangerous person.
Didn't he tell them he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler?
Yes, yeah. And we looked up on that side. Authoritarian.
And he also wanted to employ the military. If he becomes president again, he intends to employ the military against American people.
Yes. Using the Insurrection Act.
Kelly came out is that that was the reason that he decided to allow the reporter to publish his.
Oh yeah, no, there came out. Will that be enough that you have to ask on that?
I don't know if it'll be enough. There's some people that have made up their mind no matter what. I mean,
there are many people that have made up their mind. I would say 95% of the people, no matter what you say. And we have a term in political science that's called baked in. You understand? What does that mean? Oh, you just heard it. I won't quiz you on that. There's no exam. Don't worry on that side. What is right now, both Harris and Trump are appealing to young voters, and we see a reduction on that. 20% of that voted for Biden, and now it's down to 10% for Harris. So both campaigns are targeting young people, Black people, Latino people. But the Harris campaign is tapping one other group. They're reaching out to one other group. What group could well decide this election, and none of them are Democrats?
Suburban women.
Republican women in the suburbs. And who did she bring but Cheney a long way? And bless her soul, Cheney said, no one will know how you voted. You just go in there and go ahead and do that. And I think when we have that idea of that coming through, they're looking for an excuse. And we have to realize too that party identification is like church identification. You may not like the minister, but you stay in the church, right? And that's why we're seeing all people that I'm disappointed that are giving in and keeping their mouths shut. And I looked at that and I decided that was because that's their job. Their entire life was spent promoting one party or the other party. And when you have a crisis that we have today, they still cling to a monument of. So look for finally point. When go back to Clinton and Trump, and they came to West Virginia. No one comes to, unless you're a battleground state, no one comes to you. And Hillary came and promised $1 billion to retrain the miners. And Trump here came about 2 weeks later and promised $1 billion that was going to reopen the mines. And being skeptical West Virginians, what did we think of both those things? It ain't gonna happen. Yeah, yeah. But now, in a sense, when we're looking at what the closing argument, that is the key. So watch the next 2 weeks, see how dark it gets, see if there's an October surprise. But whatever that is, remember who is in the White House. John Adams was elected when he was the first president to go into the White House. And he had engraved on the mantle in the fireplace at the White House, I pray heaven to bestow the best of blessings on this house and all who shall hereafter inhabit it. May none but honest and wise men rule under this roof. That's the standard that Adams made, and that's the standard I hope we will use when we're talking about. But right now, ask me, what's going on? What's your opinion? What you thinking? Who wants to lead off? Yes.
Dr. First of all, I want to affirm you. I was not a big history buff growing up who, earned his 5-year MBA, but was a history
Right.
minor and, very much loves this. So I wanted to affirm you for that. Thank you for all the years that you have taught us at West.
I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't enjoy it. And that's,
And my question,
yes.
early voting, of course, allows for more accessibility to people that may not be able to get that one day off
Yeah.
those 12 hours. But is there any way that early voting can have a con? Like, is there anything about early voting?
They've investigated that up and down, and they haven't found it. They said even a video on that. This is really a bigger question. If we say we live in a democracy, shouldn't we encourage everyone to vote? Well, they don't vote on election day. Well, therefore we expend it, and we have it. It's so easy, or you can roll it down, or this whole place. We've been moving this way, and now just recently we've been going this way on that. And I think that goes as it's so far. I haven't found specific evidence, and neither has anyone else that I know of, that there's a backdrop to early voting. And since I believe in voting, I'm totally in favor of that, even though it's a long time.
I believe in early voting. My only concern would be is if you vote too soon and one of those October surprises come out after you've voted that would change your mind, then there's a little bit of negative because it's too late then.
It's too late.
So,
and think about all the money these parties are going to be pouring in for the last 2 weeks when we already have 50% of the people made up their mind. And I would think they made up their mind way back in the summer, because I think the other historian is that they dumped Biden. And what's the reason they did? It was number wise. He was not only losing, but he was dragging down the other people on the side. And weren't you surprised at how easy the transition went and how positive that convention was? That was an amazing. She literally brought in hope and turned the page on that. And the interesting thing is she was underestimated. She was low when he was president. She was coming out low on the polls. So it sort of reaffirms me. You can escape your label is what you can do if you step up and do it. Other questions? Yep.
Jefferson believed in an intelligent electorate. And I just wonder if this election is also going to be decided between the people that have like a half a brain and are educated and the people that don't pay any attention to politics at all and just are I don't know, they're sucked into this. People have called it a cult. and they're not really thinking.
No, that is a dangerous, if we're looking at profiles. And what we're finding now, what the future holds, as if there's a future, we'll be waiting on that side, is that we are going through a realignment. And what is the one variable? It used to be money. You tell me your salary and I can predict. It used to be region. You tell me where you live and I can predict who. Now what is it? Education. We can match up education. In the next future, education will be the key. And that I want everyone to vote, but I want everyone to be educated. Is that a wish dream?
No, but is it part of it though? Not just really education, and yes, I believe it's education too, but is that's also part of the socioeconomic thing? Because to me, I think I like when you said low propensity versus low information, because when I hear the word low information, I think some of these people think, oh, you think I'm low IQ or something like that thing, and I don't like the word low information because it just is too synonymous to me to, is low IQ, and they think that they're being looked down on. And to me, some of these people that have low propensity is just because they're so damn busy working 2 and 3 jobs trying to keep their head above water, and that's why they have a lower propensity, because they don't have time to try and really look at what's going on politically. And usually the people with a higher education also have a little bit better jobs where they can spend some time doing that.
And what's the solution? As an educator, what's the solution? We educate everyone. What did we do with civics courses in school? We got rid of the whole idea on that idea. And that's what worries them.
They don't have civics class anymore?
No.
It went from
And to tell you how long I've been out.
Which explains why you're here taking notes, because you got educated in terms of politics. Yeah. Other questions?
Oh, so you have 2 grandkids that are going to vote in this election. One has already mailed in their absentee ballot, and I just wanted to share. So obviously we talk politics a lot in my house, but my oldest, who's 21, I was on a writing retreat, and Biden stepped down and Kamala Harris stepped up, and it was like watching the sleeper pod just wake up. Like all of a sudden, it was like we were watching CNN and interesting. But I drove your grandson, who's 20, up to college up to Cleveland yesterday, 4 hours in the car, and he said, even though he voted for Kamala, that he doesn't feel like Kamala's really connecting with the youth as much as she could, because she's running as anti-Trump and not somebody as a traditional candidate. And he really said concerned about Palestine and Gaza, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the other one. But what do the youth feel? And because since you're teaching at Wesleyan now, and also, does it matter? Because traditionally, young people have a strong opinions, but don't turn out to vote. No,
they don't. And I tell, what's the reason we're so worried about Social Security? Because older people have more tendency to vote and younger people don't. I mean, they even tried to hand back the loan forgiveness, which was questionable on that side. And they even went that phased on that. I'm glad to see,
I want to add to that, though, that I really do think that she has a really great social media presence. She's really working with a lot of younger musicians, and
Eminem was at her.
Eminem
and Barack.
Yeah. And she has famous rappers at her conventions. I think that's reaching the younger generation.
I think that's reaching.
Count like this in the next 10 days. They're lining that up. Now, question, I don't know if it works. You think it works?
I think it works, but I also agree, we're not touching on actual issues. You're okay, here's Eminem, and everyone's okay, that's really cool. But also,
what can you do for me? Right. And then it's not being explained.
Is it that she's not touching on the issues? Because I felt like she was discussing the issues, and it's like some people were just closing their ears, tuning
I
her
think she
out.
is,
you know,
but I
because-
think like on social media and maybe like trying to reach that younger audience, it's just about like getting her in front of
Now-
them instead of like explaining what she's actually going to do.
The question is, we don't know. We'll be able to measure what effect that is. But I think that's part of a larger question. And that is, how would the campaigns change? And right now, in terms of the podcast or in terms of the social media, I mean, they're reaching, 800,000 people. And Rupp's still back here looking at a TV ad that might reach, 10,000. Yeah. And that's what we're going to see in the next election, is they're going to have more sophisticated appeals to that. But I think that's right. I tell you, the students today, at least this is just anecdotal, they're not that involved.
Yeah.
There's a presidential election, they're voting for the first time, and they're not involved.
I don't know. That scares me.
Yeah, you should.
It really scares me to hear, because I think this is a critical.
Well, it's also
election.
not in their best interest either, because like a lot of the issues like abortion will be for the females aged 28 and under, really.
Yeah,
So
like
you don't
that
find
should be
many,
being
you
explained
don't
to
find
me, and
many
it's not.
38-year-olds or 48-year-olds wanting an abortion.
Yeah, if
So like as far as women's rights go, they need.
If Harris wins, they're going to credit the suburban Republican women, and they're going to also credit the abortion issue. And notice what Harris did with the abortion issue. She framed it as freedom, control over yourself, but freedom, and that's a song that she did. But that, I think, it's caught a lot of people by surprise.
And IVF and all that kind of stuff.
Oh.
But I think that's
that is for the generation that's coming up. They need to be aware of that. I have a daughter who will have to go through that process, and she's aware of it. Why are other 23-year-olds not?
Like I know that Megan Thee Stallion.
They got a lot of decisions on that side. Remember, go back to that time. You had to worry about your possible job and possible relations and possible. They have to take time out, which is difficult for a college kid to do. But let's hope.
I would say at least amongst the people that I surround myself with, friends, other young people, I tend to surround myself with people that are politically engaged. I know are going to vote, but I feel like I just want to emphasize how big I think abortion is for young people. This is something that directly affects us. This election, we saw, in front of our own eyes, our rights get taken away and going back in time. So I think hopefully, young people will realize that, this is our time to get out and vote. And so I feel like if people do, Roe is going to be such a big factor in getting young people out to vote. And I will have to say, I really do like Harris's team, like on TikTok and social media. I like all that stuff. I think the memes are really funny. Like it's a good way to catch young people. And I feel like, a lot of young people are just kind of scrolling, looking at short videos to catch their attention. And maybe that's a way to kind of get people interested and, interested in politics, hopefully. But, obviously we'll see what happens with the turnout, but that's kind of my thoughts.
No, that's a good point. And that goes back to the question that the next election is going to be a lot different than this election. This election is even traditional, and the youth and the nation are not acting that way anymore. And they have to recognize that to do that. But as far as is it going to make a difference in endorsement, I don't know. But I hopefully we'll find out.
I don't think there was it just so happened today that on MSNBC, April Ryan was on there from the Bureau, and she had done a study. She was studying basically of some of the viewership type of thing, and how many millions, they said how many millions watched Trump when he was on Fox, and how many watched Harris when she was on Fox, and she got about twice as much. But the one that got the most, it went from millions to billions, I think it was Charlemagne.
Yeah.
The Charlemagne one, I think that basically it's basically her thing with that is the one that really.
Yeah. We're prancing around with 100,000 or million. This is serious on that. And I would say that most Americans aren't aware of that. Yeah,
Well,
that's
if
a
you're
good
talking
point.
about like reaching or trying to reach a young group who don't show up to the polls and don't really think a lot about politics and haven't thought so much about their life in the next 10 years. If you're trying to reach that group and get them to the polls, then going via Instagram and TikTok and putting memes out there because it's all mindless. TikTok is mindless, but people love it. That age group love it. They'll go out and buy a vegetable chopper because it's been on TikTok. So if they see something that Kamala does on TikTok and they love it, they'll go out and vote for her, not because of her policies, but because they saw her on TikTok. I mean,
But in this election,
makes her presence big.
Out of the 4 campaigners, how many have we seen using TikTok? And you talk about the visiting there on the STEM, but again, I hang around next 4 years, and hopefully this time we'll see. But again, we won't know.
A vegetable dropper, I'm gonna buy a vegetable dropper. Like the Taylor Swift endorsement.
Yeah. And people laugh at that, but that is huge.
And they've even made
I love
memes.
Taylor Swift, and I'm 55. Yeah.
I got you beat, and I like her too. But I think the ones that are laughing are just trying to make light of it, or to get on our just basically Republicans because they don't have any they don't have an equivalent type of thing, so they got to try and diss her. It's sour grapes.
Other questions?
Having been
Yeah.
on the school board for a number of years, I wish that I could also be affirmative of you as my neighbor. But having been to several gatherings with you at the CJ Maggie's, it seemed like all the servers were political science majors that didn't get jobs. So it's hard for me to brag on you. But I do have a question about whether or not what you think can actually happen if Trump wins. I mean, how much do you think he can actually do in this 2025?
The reason why we haven't seen a bigger reaction to what Trump says and has said and has promised is that we talked baked in. They already know, and so they don't believe he's going to do that. And that's what you're telling me about the cult on that.
And I don't think that they're necessarily being effective in the way they're saying it, because he's already tried to do some of it. The Schedule F thing, he tried to do that. He put an executive order out in the last few months of his administration. And it was Biden who canceled it when he came in. And right now I do know, former Department of Defense employee, 27 years with them, and former federal employees, so I get the things on it. So that's how I know where I'm coming from on this. That they're getting calls from federal employees that the magazine is all worried about 2025, basically, of if you're either going to do what we say, basically, or you're going to be out, type of thing. These are career employees.
And how big's the civil service? excuse me, how many million people?
Over
He
2
talks about
million in
coming and
civil
cleaning
service,
it out.
over 2 million in military. A little bit over 2 million in civil service, and a little bit over 2 million in.
So there are either two ways. They don't care about civil service, or they don't believe he's going to do that. And there should be a third one. I don't
A lot of
know.
the civil servants do their.
But yes,
Yeah.
that should be. They're
Yeah,
Maryland.
because like I said, he already did it. He put an executive order out in 2020, and that's why I think that I don't hear them stressing. He's already tried to do some of this.
I think the question is, on his first term, there were generals watching over. There were people taking away and watching. And now there's there would be no guardrails, or very smart and overly ambitious people will go with him and time. Yeah, question.
Can he do all that by executive order? What's Congress's job in all of this?
He had an executive order scheduled.
No, he has to.
He had. What's your opinion on that? With what the Supreme Court did, they upended our checks and balances.
Oh, in terms of the immunity, they're getting in on that. Yeah. Oh no, we've seen a Supreme Court that did what all the conservatives said liberal. Remember that Warren Court? They're just too liberal. They're doing too much on that stuff, getting rid of prayer. I don't know. And now it's the conservative, and they're reaching out, and that immunity.
Tie that to Marbury versus Madison. Just give them a little history. That in Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court said that they were going to check their power, and now they won't. Yeah.
I'm lost. What? Oh, you mean you're talking about judicial review?
So just
okay. Do you trust the Supreme Court that keep him in check? No. Do you what they? Yeah.
Not this court, I don't.
And I'm very concerned.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm very concerned about Trump's take on climate change and everything that he's going to eliminate, and all the restrictions that he's going to put forth and get rid of anything. And
he's a denier. And the irony is the infrastructure bill that was bipartisan by a few people, but never Biden did put in a lot of climate effect in it, built in that bill. That was most encouraging. And I suppose that's the other thing, that you youth should be worried about climate change because you might be around. That really hasn't been an issue. Now, would that be a motivating issue or not?
For young people?
Yeah.
I think it is. I think it should be, because we're going to be the ones that are going to have to deal with, all of this destruction that's going on, and we're already seeing it. I mean, look at the hurricane season this year, and so we're already seeing it, and now, no offense, everybody else is going to die off, and we're going to have to,
we mess it up, and you have to clean it up. That's on that. Have a question? What do you think's the future? No.
Dr. Rupp, I have one more thing.
Yeah.
This is to you and to our younger attendees here. My position at the college is therapist, and where I think that we assume it's a given that the LGBTQ community de facto will, be for Harris. I think many young queer people are afraid to go out and vote, period. Either because they don't want their parents knowing how they're voting, or whatever reason. I'm curious about your all's perspective, as well as Dr. Rupp's on that.
Well,
so no one wants to go out in public and defy anything, because it's what are you gonna shoot me? What is gonna happen?
But that's the good thing when you go into that voting booth, nobody knows but you.
But you can say that, and then
and what do they? Yeah. Do you speak up when someone else is doing?
I can tell you, I know of a woman who basically said she did not, in her family, she would act like she voted one way, but when she went in the booth, she voted another way. It's just she didn't want to deal with her family. If she told them how she really voted, on it. So she basically,
Well,
didn't want to admit.
someone talks about going back to the chaos that, and if we forget about I remember when it broke, a student came in and said that against the family, the division within. I said, well, what are you going to do on Thanksgiving? She said, I'm going to eat in the bathroom, I mean, the thing, is that there was a chaos, there was a division there that is disturbing on that.
I think the thing that concerns me is how close this race is. That there's this divide that is almost, so equal. And I think to myself, so this means that half the population of our country, that vision of Trump's, that's what they want as well. They're in favor of that. And it's that's what scares me.
These are scary times. It used to be, now let me reminisce here, in case you don't know about that. Campaigns used to be positive. You go rally around, you go wave your sign, you go. Now I see that at these rallies, but I don't see that on the local level. It's just they go from rally to rally, but on that.
I also think too, and I know that the people who work the polls are, I think they might be volunteering. Anyway, like if you're going to do it, there's no one. I mean, most of them are older. They're probably not they're not allowed to be I don't know what I'm trying to say. Basically, what I'm trying to say is every time I go and vote, everyone is at least 40 years older than me working the polls, which is fine. But it would be great to walk in and someone maybe my age hand me my ballot, because then I don't feel like I'm being solidly judged.
Did you volunteer?
I didn't. I worked the polls when I was in college, but I don't know. I was the youngest one by 25 years.
I don't think anybody would judge you if you walked in and asked for a ballot. I think they would be applauding you.
Yeah.
And you're showing up.
I feel like maybe that's a deterrent too from going to vote.
Oh.
I don't know.
Well, there are a whole lot of factors on that, but we need to recognize it as a serious problem and then figure out. But what are the fentanyl? Have you heard that word at all in this campaign? I mean, there's so many key issues that have not been gone.
Only in the thing of all the fentanyl's coming over across the border, from, basically all part of the migration problem, type of thing is. Conflate them both, type of thing. Even though most fentanyl is coming over at border crossings, type of things. It's I hear it in that thing, but it is a real problem. Yeah, but they haven't. The only way they've been talking about this one is just basically
immigration. Yeah,
those damn migrants. That's what you hear.
The bigger problem.
Any other questions?
Ingredients are coming from China.
China,
yeah. Can you imagine that? Oh, that's true. We haven't got it in international relations, have we? Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming. I know you're all going to vote, so I don't have to tell you to do that.
Friends.
Thank you. Yeah. And early voting is open now, so.
Yeah.
So I did too.
And vote for John Adams. None but honest and wise men should rule under this roof. Take care.
Men or women.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.